It was one of those quiet English towns people always describe as peaceful. Rows of red brick houses, well-kept hedges, old pubs with names like the Dog and Bell or the Coachman's Rest. The kind of place where the loudest thing on a Friday night was the football crowd at the pub when someone missed a penalty. That's what made the first blackout feel like such a small inconvenience, a flicker of the lights. Then gone. Street lamps went dark. Houses dropped into silence. Someone joked on Facebook about paying the electric bill with Monopoly money. People lit candles, cracked open some wine, and waited for it to come back on. It did. 90 minutes later. No big deal. The next morning, though, things felt off. A woman named Sarah Miller, 43 years old, was found dead in her kitchen by her teenage daughter. The initial report didn't suggest foul play. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, no blood, nothing except Sarah's wide frozen eyes and a tea kettle still boiling over on the stove. Then the coroner's report came back. Her tongue was gone, not bitten, not chewed, cleanly removed. People started whispering, but police told the press to calm things down. Medical anomaly, they said. Maybe self-inflicted. Don't speculate. A week passed. Another blackout hit. This time it lasted a little longer. 2 hours. The phones lit up with complaints. Someone almost fell down the stairs. Food spoiled. A dog freaked out and crashed through a glass door. People were annoyed, but again, no one panicked. Until the next morning. This time it was Robert Hughes, 61, found in his shed behind the garden, sitting on a plastic lawn chair. The only light came from a lantern on the floor. He was slumped forward, eyes closed like he'd nodded off. His wife thought he was asleep until she shook him and his head tilted, back unnaturally. Same situation, no blood, no bruising, no apparent cause of death. But again, his tongue was missing. Police started holding private meetings, but the official word remained coincidence. Maybe unrelated. People die during blackouts, it happens. Maybe stress-induced. Maybe some kind of neurological event. They never said the word murder. They definitely never said serial. But by the third case, it didn't matter what the police said. The town already knew. A woman named Debbie Clay, a part-time librarian, was found in her upstairs bathroom. It was her neighbor who called it in. He noticed her lights were still off the next morning and went to check. She was sitting in the bathtub, fully clothed, a phone in one hand, her other arm trailing in the cold water. Again, no trauma. But her tongue had been removed, cleanly. The power company swore the blackouts were just a fluke, maybe related to recent rains, maybe to aging infrastructure. They issued public apologies, promised upgrades. One technician even held a press conference and said, "I'd bet my own tongue the grid's not being tampered with." Not the best choice of words in hindsight, because 2 nights later, he was found slumped in his own garage, slouched in the driver's seat of his work van, eyes wide, mouth open, no tongue. That was victim number 4. And that's when the town broke. People started hoarding batteries. Hardware stores ran out of torches and lanterns. Parents bought walkie-talkies for their kids. Some families moved out entirely. There were rumors about people seeing shadows move in their back gardens. One woman swore she saw someone standing at the edge of her yard during the blackout, just barely illuminated by a flash of lightning. Tall, still wearing a hood. She didn't sleep for a week after that. A few folks went more extreme, boarding up basement doors, installing CCTV cameras with backup generators, sleeping in shifts. Still, the police insisted there was no direct evidence linking the deaths. They admitted the missing tongues were unusual, but not definitive proof of homicide. They asked people to remain calm, and, most importantly, not to panic during the blackouts. That advice didn't help when the 5th outage hit. This time, the entire town plunged into darkness. Street by street, block by block. It wasn't storming. There wasn't even wind, just everything went out at once and stayed out. 4 hours. People started calling it the long night. Multiple 999 calls came through, people reporting noises in their homes. Someone in the attic, footsteps inside the walls. One man said he heard someone breathing under his bed. Another family claimed their security. Camera picked up a tall figure walking through their hallway, even though their front and back doors were locked from the inside. But nothing came of it, until morning. The power came back just after 3 a.m., and when the sun came up, they found another body. This one was different. It was a young man named Jeremy Lane, 24 years old, living alone in a terrace flat. He'd been posting videos on social media, mocking the murders, calling the Blackout killer a hoax, dressing up in a ski mask and whispering into the camera like a wannabe creepypasta character. He'd made one final video during the blackout, filming himself in candlelight, pretending to be scared, making jokes about being tongue-tied if he gets caught. The video cut out halfway through. When police entered his flat, they found the camera still recording, battery long dead. Jeremy was in his closet, knees tucked up to his chest, a look of pure horror frozen on his face. And yes, his tongue was gone too. But this time there was something new. Carved into the inside wall of the closet, using what appeared to be the tip of a kitchen knife, were 6 words. Darkness is honest, light is not. That was when the investigation finally shifted. They brought in outside help. Psychological profilers, electrical engineers, forensics teams. But by then, the damage had already been done. People weren't afraid of the killer anymore. They were afraid of the dark itself. One of the most disturbing parts about the blackout killings was that the killer never left a trace. No fingerprints. No signs of forced entry. No fibers, no hair, no blood. Not even a smudge on the doorknob. Victims were found in different rooms, some in bed, some in their kitchens, some hiding in closets, but every scene was clean, too clean, as if the killer had been there before the lights even went out, as if they were already inside. That theory started as a rumor. Whispers between neighbors, people saying things like, what if he's been living in the walls? Or what if he's in our attics just waiting for the next blackout? The kind of things people say half joking, just to freak each other out. But that all changed the day someone survived. His name was George Whitman, 83 years old, widowed. He lived alone in a creaky, old semi-detached house on the east side of town, the kind of place with floorboards that groaned like a haunted ship. George was blind, lost his sight in his late 60s due to a degenerative disease. He didn't go out much. He didn't even own a TV, just an old radio, a kettle, and a habit of falling asleep in his recliner, with the electric fire on. The night he survived was during the town's 6th blackout. It happened just after midnight. Power cut out across 3 blocks. By this point, the town had already lost 8 people, 8 tongues, and no suspect. Police had ramped up patrols, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. And in the dark, no one could call for help anyway. The lines always went dead. George later told police that he had been dozing. In his chair when he heard the power fail, the electric heater made a popping sound, then silence. For most people, that silence was terrifying. But for George, it was normal. Darkness didn't bother him. He lived in it. What bothered him was the sound that followed. At first it was faint, a gentle creak in the hallway. Then another. Soft, careful steps like someone trying not to wake the house. George said it reminded him of how his daughter used to sneak into the kitchen at night as a kid to steal biscuits. He called out, "Hello?" No answer. But the footsteps stopped. Then he heard something else, a whisper. Not like someone whispering to him, but to themselves. Over and over, muttering, chanting right outside the living room doorway. George said he froze. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone. There was something wet about it. Not just raspy, but moist. Like whoever was speaking didn't have a full tongue in their mouth. Like they were gurgling through their teeth. It made his skin crawl. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there in the dark. Then he heard the whisper again, this time from the wall, behind him. He reached for his walking stick, stood up slowly, and shuffled toward the kitchen, where he kept an old rotary phone with a backup power line. But as he reached the hallway, he stopped. Someone was breathing right in front of him, close enough that he could smell it. It wasn't just bad breath, it was rot. Sour like spoiled meat. George said he hadn't smelled anything like that since the war. He swung the stick forward, nothing, air. He turned, took 3 steps back and slammed the kitchen door shut. Locked it, then called the operator. The call lasted less than 10 seconds before it cut out. The police didn't arrive until morning. They found George still in the kitchen, holding a kitchen knife, shaking uncontrollably. The rest of the house was wrong, not trashed, not broken into, but disturbed. Furniture had been moved by a few inches. Closet doors slightly ajar. The access panel to the crawl space in the ceiling had been unscrewed cleanly. And down in the basement, behind the water heater, police found something that made 2 officers walk out and throw up in the garden. Jars. 3 of them, each filled with murky liquid, each containing what looked like tongues, preserved, carefully placed. And beneath them a journal. Not a full notebook, just scraps of torn paper. Burned at the edges, scribbled with writing that barely looked human. Just fragments of sentences. Too much noise, they lie. All of them lie with it. Tongue is the mask. Peel the mask. They scream less if you whisper first. The most recent page had a date. It was that same night. And beneath the date, a list. 5 names. 4 of them matched known victims. The 5th, George Whitman. Police launched a full investigation. They brought in forensic teams to search the walls. Ceilings, floors, anywhere someone could hide. The crawl spaces were large enough to fit a person. Barely. They found old food wrappers, torn clothing, scratches on the inside of the drywall, like fingernails scraping for balance. They even found a small, circular hole drilled into the wall behind. George's living room, positioned perfectly to look into the room. A peephole from inside the walls. That was the first time the media picked up the phrase. That stuck with the case to this day. The whisperer in the walls. People demanded answers. Police gave none. When reporters asked George how he survived, he only said one thing. I didn't run. I listened. He hates when people scream, but he didn't expect me to smile back. After the incident, George moved in with his daughter 2 towns over. He refused to speak to journalists, refused interviews, podcasts, documentaries. Never spoke publicly again, but a month later someone posted a video anonymously online. It showed a dark hallway, a creaking floorboard, a soft whisper from inside the wall, then static. At the end of the clip, a man's voice could be heard low and calm. The blind one sees better. He doesn't lie. That's when people began to wonder. Was George really just a survivor? Or was he the only one the killer spared because he listened? Police still don't know how the killer entered the homes. They don't know how he avoided every camera, every alarm, every dog. But the pattern was clear. He wasn't choosing random homes. He was already inside them, just waiting. And when the lights went out, he whispered. Then he cut. And always, without fail, he took the tongue. For months after the George Whitman incident, the town seemed to settle into a weird kind of paranoia. The police increased patrols. The electric company installed new transformers. A few houses even rigged up backup solar lights that clicked on when the grid failed. Nobody ever admitted it out loud, but everyone was waiting for the next blackout. They didn't know when it would come, but they knew deep down that it would, because the killer hadn't been caught. No arrests, no suspects, nothing concrete except whispers, mutilated bodies, and those damn jars in the basement. The town's attention shifted to the crawl spaces. Electricians started refusing to do home repairs alone. Pest control companies were called in to inspect attics. Some people went so far as to bolt their vents shut with sheet metal. Others just moved away. And yet, no new deaths, no new tongues taken. For almost 3 months, the darkness stayed quiet. And then came the night the cameras went dark. It was a Thursday. Mild weather. No rain, no storms. Around 2:14 a.m., the town experienced a rolling power failure. Only this time, it wasn't just the lights. All of the street cameras failed. Every single one, doorbell cams, traffic monitors, even CCTV at the local Tesco, all dead. Not just offline, but corrupted. The footage was unrecoverable. Tech experts were brought in. They said it looked like a deliberate internal wipe. One of the analysts, a guy named Curtis, was assigned to comb through a backup system at a substation on the edge of town. That substation had an emergency battery backup that, in theory, should have captured at least something. What he found was a 10-second clip. It was nothing but static. Until it wasn't. For 2 seconds, the screen showed a figure. Very tall, very still. in a room that couldn't be identified. He stood directly in front of the camera, head tilted slightly, not blinking. And then he raised one hand slowly, deliberately, 2 fingers up, like a peace sign. The clip ended. Curtis played it back 100 times. He told his boss he couldn't sleep. He started leaving the lights on at work. A week later, he was found dead in his flat, electrocuted by a frayed power cable he himself had replaced. 2 days earlier, his tongue was still intact. But in the mirror, written in condensation, was a message. He waits inside the wires. That phrase was what finally made people outside the town pay attention. Forums lit up with theories. True crime YouTubers made hour-long breakdowns. Paranormal channels claimed the killer was a ghost, or a government experiment, or some kind of urban demon that fed on sound. But the locals, they didn't laugh. They just waited. And then, almost exactly 1 year after the first blackout, the power failed again, this time for 7 hours straight. But this one was different. No one died. Instead, something appeared. It happened at the old municipal building, which had been abandoned for years. The police used it for storage, old records, broken filing cabinets, stuff like that. But that night, a janitor named Levi showed up to do inventory, not realizing the building still had partial power. He said it started with a sound, not footsteps, not a whisper, typing. Slow, rhythmic, like someone pecking at an old typewriter in the next room. He followed it, thought maybe it was a radio picking up interference. Instead, he found a printer, a dusty HP inkjet printer from the early 2000s, plugged into nothing. But it was printing. 1 page. And when it finished, Levi said it was still warm. It had only 2 lines. You've stopped listening, so I've started writing. Levi left the paper on the desk, walked out of the building and called the police. When they arrived, the printer was gone. So was the paper. But there were more pages. Over the next 5 nights, 17 separate printers across town, from schools, businesses, even a private residence, began printing pages during blackouts. Each one contained a message. The contents were erratic. Some were cryptic, some deeply personal, some completely unhinged, but all signed the same way. Yen. That was when investigators remembered the name from nearly a year ago. Paul Niven, the disgraced electrician, the man fired for hiding in homes, the man thought to be dead, the man whose face matched the figure in the grainy video. They ran his file, pulled up old addresses, all abandoned. They tried to contact family, none alive. They finally checked an old hunting cabin registered under his name, far out in the woods, past the reach of the town's grid. What they found should have made national headlines, but it didn't, because that footage never made it out of the police archive. The body inside the cabin was badly decomposed, face unrecognizable. Dental records were inconclusive. But what disturbed the responding officers wasn't the corpse. It was the equipment. Cables, radios, batteries, hard drives stacked floor to ceiling, a generator connected directly into a wall of printed photographs, victims, neighbors, police, even George Whitman. And in the center of the room, a map, not just of the town, but of the power grid, labeled Market Rewired. Someone had been watching the entire town for years, controlling the power. But Paul Niven, he was dead. Very dead, estimated time of death, before the second murder even happened, which meant he wasn't the one doing this. Not anymore. The final discovery came in the form of a USB stick taped to the wall. On it, one video file. It was only 4 seconds long. It showed a dim hallway, a camera shaking slightly, a whisper growing louder. Then the voice. Low, inhuman, not a whisper anymore, but a hiss. I have no face. I have no name. I live where the silence grows. Then static. And finally a single line of white text. You unplugged the man, but not the thing. The stick was encrypted, self-wiped after playback. No chance to analyze it further. The official report blamed the killings on Paul Niven, declared him deceased. Case closed, but that didn't explain why a month later, 3 different towns in 3 different countries experienced identical blackouts, each lasting 7 hours, each followed by a body, each missing a tongue, and beside each body, a page typed clean. If you see the lights flicker, it means I've already passed through. No footprints, no leads, just darkness and silence. And somewhere deep inside your walls, the sound of breathing.